I feel for these guys at the end of the day. And I know that the entire UFC community is like wanting to take Jake Paul down. You know, they're like, can you just like knock him out already? We want to be done with this guy, because it's hard to watch him come and take the spotlight when they've had to work so hard to get there. I mean, like every single one of the guys I interview, I ask, all right, so tell me, how'd you make it into the UFC? Whether it was through, you know, Contender Series or Tough or, you know, another promotion or, you know, last minute week's notice fight type thing. It was still one of the best moments of their lives to get that call, you know? And then this guy's bypassing it all. I don't know. It kind of breaks my heart.
Well, yeah, but now he's got a real fight. So now he's not bypassing anymore, which is why I have respect for him. You know, and if he swallowed his pride and here's the thing, he cares about money and fame more than fighting and more than these things that he says he has passion for, right? We as fighters, we're fighters. Yeah, we cared about fighting. We didn't give a shit about the money. We didn't give a shit about the fame. And that's why we had successful careers. He cares about the money only. Otherwise, he would decide to be a boxer like Mickey Rourke did, right? And then he would go in there and then he would fight boxers and make less money, but build himself up the right way, fight guys that he should be fighting, and then try and make it as a boxer. And he would propel faster because he's a big star, and he'd make more money than he would if he was fighting those guys, if he wasn't a big name. But I would have all the respect in the world for him if he did that and tried to make a legitimate name for himself as a boxer and be a legit boxer. But he's not in it for boxing. He's not in it for competition. He's not in it to win fights against guys on his level. He's in it for the money, and he's in it for the fame, and that's why he's going to lose and not be successful, because you have to have passion about what you're doing to be successful at it. You can only go so far. He can't just keep doing this for 20 fights. He's not going to be undefeated in 20 fights by handpicking fights and getting lucky and beating, if he beats Tyron or whatever and just gets crazy lucky or whatever. He's not going to be able to do that forever. It's going to come to a stop. It's going to come down to what you're passionate about. And every successful person that I know, they were successful because they were passionate about their job, not about what comes from their job. And then later they got the things that came from their job and became successful. So I think that's his downfall. And I think that's what's going to hurt him in the end. And he's going to run into that wall, and it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt because it's fun to talk about people and kick them when they're down and make fun of guys that are just nice guys like basketball players and YouTubers and stuff like that just get knocked out, and then you embarrass the shit out of them by putting their photos all over your Instagram and making memes and doing all this. It's fun to do all that until you're the guy that takes second place in fighting and you get flatlined and 30 million people are making memes about you. And you have to sit there, and everywhere you look, you can't avoid seeing yourself getting knocked out. He's gonna have some depression from that. I'm telling you straight up. I've been depressed after every loss, and I had passion about fighting, and I had been beat up multiple times in the gym, and I had dealt with adversary and getting beat and losses my whole life and stumbling and falling, and I was still depressed. How do you think that guy's going to handle it? You know, how do you think he's going to handle that?
I think he's kind of, look, I agree with you, but the guy's successful on social media, and he generates so much hate through, you know, in order to create traction for himself, that I think he's actually kind of okay with like the hate that's going to come his way, but because he's already getting it, you know. Look, I would love to see this guy be more respectful. That's kind of all I want. You know, I'm not bashing his career, and, you know, like, fair enough. You managed to build something that very few people have access to, like, good for you from a business perspective, but damn, stop taking cheap shots. You know, I don't like it.
It's going to happen now because Tyron's going to humble him. And this is the thing, just like Khabib did with Conor. When you talk shit before a fight and you talk so much shit before a fight and you use everything in your arsenal to try to say you're going to beat this guy's ass in every way possible and be as obnoxious as you can, and then you quit because you get choked out and you get humbled, like you just get completely humbled in the fight, it changes you. Conor McGregor hasn't been the same since. Conor fought Cowboy and was as nice and respectful as you could possibly be. Then he went into a fight with Dustin, who he could have easily been obnoxious with because he knocked Dustin out in the first round. And he wanted to sell the fight, right? He wants to make money and sells pay-per-views. And he couldn't have been nicer in that fight. He hasn't talked shit since Khabib humbled him. And so what is Jake gonna do? If Jake goes and gets absolutely embarrassed, if he starts talking shit in his next fight and he's gonna murder this guy and beat him up and knock him out, people are gonna be like, yo, dude, I don't believe a fucking thing you're saying. You just got the shit beat out of you. So it's gonna take away. So if you want him to be more humble, when are they fighting again? Was like 2 months from now? Give him 2 months.
Yeah.
Give him 2 months and you'll see a more humble Jake Paul for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting you talk about Conor being humbled. My heart broke for him a little bit after his loss to Dustin, only because I watched all of the post-fight interviews and it was just like deflating a balloon, you see him and he's just melancholy and I just my heart hurt for him because we love seeing charismatic, pumped up, chest pumping Conor, and then to see him like that was hard. It was hard for me to watch.
I hated it. I love the show. I love the show that Conor puts on before the fight as much as the fight. I love it. I love hearing him talk the shit and do his thing, and that's what makes it. Because
he's clever, he's charismatic, he's funny. And he's also kind of sweet sometimes, so there's that likability aspect to him. It's very different. It's kind of like one of the, you got it or you don't, you can't manufacture that.
Well, I mean, that's obviously kind of a headline too. What do you think is going to happen in that fight? I think that whether he wins or loses, I think he's going to put on a better fight than he did last time. I honestly do. And I think it's going to be a lot closer. And I think he's going to have a way better performance, in my opinion, against Dustin than he did the last time.
I agree with that 100%. I can't predict the outcome, but I see that they're both working really hard. Yeah. They both want this very much. So however much they wanted it before, Dustin really wanted it. They're really in it this time. And I think that, listen, Conor is a mogul, right? He's got businesses that are working for him in his sleep. So I think that it kind of he relaxed a little bit, before his last fight. And now, he had his wake up call and he was like, shit, I didn't like that feeling. I don't want to do that again. And so I think old Conor's coming back and he's kicking it into high gear. So like you said, I think it's going to be more entertaining, to say the least.
And he's proven he's passionate, right? I mean, he's the number one paid athlete in the last 12 months on Forbes list right now. He's beating Ronaldo and Messi, right? Of course, it has to do with his sell of Proper 12. But the thing is he doesn't need to fight. We've heard people say that before. He really, honestly doesn't need to fight. The last thing he needs to do is go into a cage and fight a guy as tough and as hard to fight as Dustin for a fraction of the money that he can care less about, because he's going to lose half of it in taxes anyway. It's nothing to him. That shows you, and why I respect him so much and have gained so much more respect for him, that he's passionate about fighting and he's a real fighter. Because he could have very easily not fought Dustin again right now and taken the Jake Paul fight instead of Tyron. Jake Paul was calling him out for $50 million to fight him before he ever signed to fight Poirier again. And he still never even, I don't think, responded in my opinion, very little, if anything, to Jake Paul, and has taken the fight with Poirier. That says a lot, because he's not going to make the same money with Poirier as he would have fought and made with Jake Paul, and he would have beat Jake Paul easier. But that just shows you right there, he's not in it for the bullshit. He's in it for real fights. And he fought Mayweather for it to be a real fight. He fought Mayweather because he's the best in a real pro boxing fight, not an exhibition. And he fought him to try and beat the best fighter in the world, not as a gimmick. And now he's fighting Dustin Poirier, who I think is one of the best fighters in the world. And he had other options. And I think that says a lot. And I think he's motivated as shit to beat Dustin. And when he was motivated the first time, and he's a very strong starter, he did very well. And I think this last time, like you said, we didn't see the same Conor. We saw Conor with his baby all the time. We saw Conor shaking hands all the time and smiling and looking somehow 10 years older than he looked in his previous fight. He gained 10 years the way he looks. I mean, it's weird. We saw a different Conor, and I was scared from the second we first saw him until the fight, because I'm like, this isn't Conor. This is some other guy. And then he got knocked out. even though he did have a decent fight, he got knocked out. But I think this time, I think he's motivated and he's hungry, and he didn't like getting knocked out. And I think we're going to see a hell of a good fight this time.
All right. So now, would Conor's businesses do as well if he wasn't still very much present in the UFC community? And I ask this because did that perhaps force his hand to accept the Dustin fight over the Jake Paul fight? You know, because that's kind of like, I mean, not to be disrespectful, it's like a kind of a joke, right? When you can headline, you know, and fill a huge room full of people and sell 1 million tickets and whatever, right? So I don't know. Part of me feels like he's a fighter, but he didn't have a choice to, because he'd be considered a sellout if he went for the Jake Paul fight, I think.
He might have, you know, and that's legitimate argument there. You know, he doesn't have any more big businesses now. We'll never see, I don't think, in my opinion, Conor on the number one spot of Forbes again. You know, it's because he sold Proper 12 and he sold that business now. So now he only has Conor Fast and small stuff and sponsors. Nothing that's going to make him $150 million in a single day.
Right.
But he's definitely going to be doing well for the rest of his life. And I think, I don't know his business accolades, but I think as a business person, in my opinion, because he trains so much and he is as good as he is, I think he has the right business people around him because he's got so much money. I think he's less as good of a business person as a successful person who finds the right people or who found him and they run his businesses. He's not a guy who sits and does business like I do all day, you know, working deals, you know, having meetings and doing stuff like that. He can't possibly do that and still be a fighter. So I think that the money and getting the right people but I will say this, which is just as important, I think, in some aspects, though he might not be as good of a business person as he is having the money and the right people, he is an expert marketer. And I think that Proper 12 wouldn't have sold and been as big as it was with him not being in the helm marketing himself and that brand. I think he is an absolute expert in that regard. And that's something I think he's passionate about, marketing, and he can do that alongside fighting and not take as much time, because it's just every second he's not fighting he's talking about his brands and about marketing this Conor Fast and Proper 12, whatever. And he's just a genius at that. So I'll give him credit for that. I think he's a genius marketer, to say the least. And business, I just don't know. I just assume probably not a savage business guy, but definitely a guy who has the right people, like Floyd. I think Floyd's not a savage business guy either, but he's got the best guys around him, and he set himself up to be the highest paid athlete per his sport than any sport in the world. He's the only athlete in the world that's made over $1 billion from actual sports, not from sponsors. No other athlete on earth has ever made $1 billion from their actual sport. They've only made up to $1 billion or more from their sport, plus mostly sponsors that paid more than that. So Floyd has the best business model on the market for a fighter. Not even on the market, but just in general for a fighter. And I don't know who set that up and how it started and how it came about, but he definitely, and he proved it again tonight. He got me to pay $50 for a fight I was just pissed off at the entire time.